while I'm getting this pulled up, guys, as always, we want to start off on a positive note. So anybody have any wins, any good things that have been going on this week? Tell us the good news with what's been going on in your neck of the woods.
Shoot, that's right. I forgot about wins. I was supposed to ask that. Guys, come on. What wins do we have this morning? Oh, Darren's got one.
Potential win. I am looking to build these pools called bio-design pools, and communicated with a woman. Then went out and saw them yesterday. Did not get a deposit, so I don't want to jinx myself. But small pool, but it'll be the first bio-design pool that we build, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get it. So that's a win.
Wow. I don't know any better, but it didn't sound like to me that was knocking on wood. That sounded like something other than wood. But
it's a solid wooden table.
Oh, so it's real wood. That's
with a plate on top.
I'm used to the plywood IKEA desk here. So, well, not at the office, you know, some other places. But wow, that's really cool. Yeah.
Woo.
They're very unique. I don't know if most people know about them, but they actually are it's almost like a beach sculpted look. It's very natural looking in your backyard. Is that a good description, Darren?
It's a great description. It's a great description.
Yeah, they're pretty cool and unique.
Or you love it or you don't. And the people that love it, hopefully, are gonna buy a lot from it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Any other wins?
Before we get going here, I'm going to call people out. We've only got a couple people with their cameras on. I'm looking at a lot of my coworkers. I see them all day long. Can somebody else turn on their camera? So I completely understand if you are in a pickle and you're just trying to listen, but if there's any way that you can turn on your cameras, we'd love to see you. We're going to be in breakout rooms here in about 30 minutes. And so we'll be more interactive. If you're able to turn your camera, please do.
Nice. Okay, well, as we get going here, guys, as always, you know, stuff we have on the agenda, we want to give opportunity for anybody that's got any questions for us, just to off the bat be able to answer whatever you may be concerned, curious about, like we talked about as well, wins. What we're covering today, the applicable skill, is just making meetings meaningful. We've talked about this in the past, but it's always something that is really important. And whenever we talk about business organization and structure, if that's the thing that you are focused on in your business that you know that you need the most help in, this is the number one way to start making progress, start making traction in that direction. And then, as Nicole said, we're going to break out towards the end, have a do it now time where we're actually going to go through and get set up to be able to do that well. So that said, any other wins that people have that they want to share before we get rolling here?
I'll be honest, when I saw this picture, I thought it was a couple dead animals. So
what?
I got a win.
Let's hear it.
So I just recently joined, and we had just set up our, I believe, the Google local listing.
That's right.
And I think we just got our first lead, like genuinely, which was because we had a couple people reach out, and those were people just interested in working with us. But we had our first genuine custom lead today, so we'll be meeting up with them later on today.
Come on, that's what I'm talking about.
That's great.
Nice. Okay. Well, if nobody else has any other wins, I'll share this one and the reason for this picture. So this is Cameron Harlan here with Fox Mountain Carpentry. And he's relatively newer on board with us, but already seeing some great improvement. And by the way, Cameron, are you actually on the call this morning? I don't know if I saw you in here. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. But one of the biggest issues that we identified right off the bat with Cameron was that he had a lot of time being pulled on his schedule to be able to go back and forth to Home Depot, and really just people not being aware of what was going on job sites. It was just stretching out the timeline of all the projects. And we first started just implementing team meetings, all the stuff we're going to be talking about today. And just because of implementing team meetings, this is what Cameron said whenever he talked to me in our call last week, but not only was July their biggest revenue month because they were more productive, but the time that he spent going to Home Depot was reduced by like 75% is what he said. Just because everybody knew ahead of time, there was some planning and forethought going on, communication, that they were able to get things done in advance and be ready for the job before it happened. So team meetings, if you don't feel like it can make a lot of difference in your business, if you have this perception that meetings are monotonous and that they're not really helpful, it's just something that people in corporate worlds like to do to fill their time, there is value, there is purpose to it, and Cameron's a perfect example of that. So
Wow.
that said, I'm going to get into it today, and then we'll get into our breakout rooms. But for me and for you all, the way that I want to challenge you to start thinking about team meetings and what they mean for you is the opportunity to preemptively put out these burning fires. How many of you guys say, and probably even said whenever you started with us, the biggest thing is your hair is on fire, you're moving around from thing to thing, you're always having to deal with issues within your company. How many people is that true for? Yeah, almost every single person here. So we know that this is what's happening in the business, and this is what meetings are about. So there's a quote that I want to share and kind of change a little bit here. It's by a guy named Dave Kurlan. He said, the good salespeople are not born, they're trained. But really what's also true of this is that good employees are not born, they are trained. Right now and most every day, you're probably getting tons of calls a day. Although they may not be leads, they're actually these got-a-minute meetings. And you hardly notice what it's doing to you and your productivity because your employees are always having to reach out to you and say, hey, I've got an issue here, or this is happening, or I'm not sure about this. A lot of times you're answering the same question multiple times over and over, just to different people. If instead you had this collected time where you're going to address it once, address it to the whole team, it makes a big difference here between asking people for favors and saying, hey, can you do this for me right now? Or hey, for today, do this, versus in a structured meeting where it's a different environment. You think, and your team is going to think about what you communicate, what you roll out to your team in a completely different way. And so this idea about training employees that are good is something that we're going to do over time. You're not going to find a century team, you're going to build your century team. And how do we do that? You can say, yeah, that's all well and good, Bryce, I appreciate that. But what does it practically look like in my business and any business? So there's a lot of ways, a lot of things that this comes back to. First, it's having numbers, KPIs, key performance indicators to be able to look at, evaluate with your team so that you're setting goals, you're setting a future vision. You're not just trying to figure out how well did we do today, how well did we do yesterday, but how are we doing over time? What is our trajectory looking like? Where are we headed with these things? And further, it's setting up checklists, establishing a flow for your team, your office staff, everybody. Whether it's service technicians, having a service call checklist, which we can do. We have plenty for all the people that we work with, different industries. There's different checklists that we already have ready for that. Not only for service technicians, but also for office staff and everyone in between. And then ultimately, it comes back to this idea of team meetings. Do you have a way to communicate within your team in a structured environment? Do they have a way of knowing what you're expecting from them? It's through having documented systems and putting your brain on paper. And so the idea that we're going to talk about today is really this idea of level 10 meetings. It comes from this guy named Gino Wickman. Does anybody know who Gino Wickman is? Can anybody tell me? Not Harley. Does anybody know who this guy is? Dwayne, I know you know who this guy is. What does he do? I guess Dwayne may not be with us anymore. Okay, well, Gino Wickman.
I can't quite see the picture. It's I'm on my phone. I can't quite see.
So Gino Wickman is the guy that wrote the book called Traction. which I'm sure a lot of you have at least heard once or twice before. It's a really fundamental foundational book for a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs. But this idea of level 10 meetings comes from this book. And the reason for that is because in doing some research from business owners, especially small business owners, they rate the quality of their meetings as a 4 out of 10. That sucks. A 4 out of 10 is less than half kind of quality. So this idea of rating meetings at a 10 out of 10 is the goal here. And that's what this idea of level 10 meetings comes from. And there's a lot of benefits to this, but two that I'll point out in particular before we get into some of the actual details here is that it's an effective time management tool. If you feel like you're running around from all these things, just like the win that I shared with Cameron with Fox Mountain Carpentry, you are going to have a much better control of your time when you have a structured way to meet with your team, communicate with your team, and be able to get tasks actually done when you're holding a regular team meeting. And we'll talk about practically what this looks like more in a minute, but that's a huge portion of this. And I think of the idea of a Parkinson's law. Some of you may know of this because of the Profit First conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, or just from being around long enough. But this idea, it's a psychological principle that says that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So if we set a meeting for 2 hours, or if we don't set a time limit on a meeting, it's likely going to take 2 hours, even if we could have done that same thing in just 45 minutes. Same thing with the tasks that we assign to our team in the business. If we just tell somebody, hey, Eric, I need you to take care of this for me. He may do it that day. He may do it that hour. He may do it in the next week. Unless we set a specific time frame in which to do it, it's just going to take forever and it's going to take way too long. And that may be where a lot of the inefficiency that you guys are running into in your businesses is coming from. It's just an unstructured environment of how we delegate tasks. And that's the other part, is that it's probably the most effective way. I won't say probably, it is the most effective way to delegate responsibility in your team whenever you document it out. There's this idea that runs through my head a lot. It's this idea that everyone's responsibility is no one's responsibility at all. If we just ask broadly for somebody or the team to take care of something without assigning specific responsibility, it's more than likely not going to get done, or it won't get done to the best of someone's ability. We're all going to assume that someone else is going to take care of it and do it for us. And that's just natural for people. So actually running level 10 meetings, there's 5 rules that Gino talks about. And the first is setting these meetings at the same day, creating a pattern, creating a rhythm. There's another way that we talk about meeting with your teams that's called daily huddles. And you can talk with your coach about whether or not that makes sense or if that's applicable for you. But for these level 10 meetings, we're talking about once a week, Fridays, Mondays, Wednesdays, whatever works for you and your team schedule. Do it at the same day. Secondly, do it at the same time. We want to use the same agenda every time. And then the last 2 things is just to start on time and end on time. It's simple, right? Is there anybody confused on these steps here? It is so simple. Not to make anybody feel any certain way, but it is really simple, and that's what we want to do. If you've heard the acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid, that's what we're going for here. Just same day, same time, same agenda, starting on time and ending on time. Consistency, predictability is going to lead to actual positive progress, positive motion in your business.
I got a question.
Go for it.
Okay, so somebody else, as far as running meetings, mentioned create whatever task needs to get done for that meeting, stay on topic, and then if it takes 10 minutes, the meeting's over. If it takes an hour, the meeting's over. But as long as you stay on task versus a start time and an end time. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we wouldn't say rigidly if you're done talking about what you need to talk about, just to keep, shooting the breeze with everybody until it reaches 9:30, but yeah, it's part of it. And that's something that we'll talk about, especially in the breakout rooms when we're looking at the action items. When you know ahead of time what you need to cover, and you take the burning fires that people are going to bring and throw at you at the beginning of the meeting, and you just come back to them towards the end, but you cover what needs to be covered first, then yeah, absolutely. Cover what's important.
I think what Bryce is, I know what Bryce is emphasizing here is start on time. In other words, don't start late, and end on time. In other words, don't go past the time allocated for the meeting. So if you can end early, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
and with this, one thing our boss always says, you've probably heard it a million times. Tim always says that casualness creates casualties. That's where I see the biggest mistakes happening when it comes to team meetings. We have it once. We constantly reschedule it and move it around. The boss shows up late to it. You are not pulling up the agenda every time. We're not using the agenda. We aren't holding the team accountable to using the agenda. If you are casual about these things, the systems are only as good as your commitment level to them. And so if you just do it once, or if you become casual about it, and same thing with starting on time, if you don't honor the systems in the time frame and the meetings, your guys are not going to honor it either. It's going to become something that we end up not doing. And so it's just making sure that we have really that level of respect and commitment to the system.
Yep, that is absolutely right. So that in mind, where do we need to start? So there's this quote that you guys see on here: just exceptional leaders are fearless in setting expectations in clear language. Some of you may have this fear, and I could be totally off base, but I have a thought that some of you may have this fear that if you set up these clear expectations, that everybody's just never going to make them, they're never going to actually do what you're asking them to do. They're just going to fall short. So why set them? Why communicate them? Now, I don't think anybody actually has that fear. You want to have your team do what you're asking them to do. And so what we need to create here is just a consistent feedback loop with your team. How can they address issues with you? If the only way that they can do that is by blowing up your phone, there's a reason your phone's blowing up all the time. There's no way for them to do it otherwise. Getting a consistent feedback loop, not only for issues that come up, but also that's where the best ideas can come from with your team. They are on the field, boots on the ground every day, day in and day out. They may have the best idea on how to make something a little bit better, or at least have the start to an idea that then, with the collective knowledge of the team, talking about that during a team meeting, then you make it a best practice. Tim says all the time, none of us is as smart as all of us. And I think that he gets that quote from somewhere else, but it's true. When we use the knowledge of the team, the collective knowledge, that makes for much better solutions and fixes and enhancements to what's going on. Secondly, we want to assign specific action items in team meetings. Again, everyone's responsibility is no one's responsibility. And then lastly, just clear, level-headed setting and communication of expectations with your team. If you've never communicated to your team what you expect of them, or if it's just been, comments that you feel like you've made 100 times over here and there, but for some reason it's just not sticking with them, it's probably because it's just been comments here and there and not something that they've thought of as, okay, he means this or she means this all of the time. This is the expectation from here going forward, not just in response to this one situation that happened. We want to be proactive, not reactive to the things that are going on. Okay. And then lastly, just a couple things here before we get into the breakout rooms, but how do we start doing your team meetings? First, create. If you have your own ideas about how to do this, that's fine. Use an agenda, but do something that's documented, or use the agenda we're about to go over in these breakout rooms. Secondly, as Nicole emphasized, schedule your first team meeting, make it happen the first time, but you have to make sure it's a recurring event. You have to make it predictable, reliable. That way your team knows, okay, I don't have to address this with Dwayne right now, because I know that on Thursday we're going to have our team meeting, And so this is not a burning fire issue. I don't need to blow them up about it, and I can wait until Thursday. That happens. It really does whenever people know where they can give you feedback. Jonathan Rood, our famous coach here, has this incredible quote that we all use a lot. He said that the predictability of accountability leads to ultimate transformation.
Wow, that was good.
And then the last point here that I'll make before we break out is get all of your team members on there. Don't make exceptions. Do it via Zoom, do it via FaceTime if you have to. Even if your team is meeting on different job sites, or if you have, a really expansive team, if you have office staff and technicians and it looks really complicated, have everybody join in to a certain time. They don't necessarily have to be in the same place. That wasn't one of our 5 rules. Just make it happen. And be firm with yourself about your schedule and the rocks you're putting in your calendar, like your team meeting. So overall, big idea here, guys. You can definitely implement team meetings no matter what your team looks like at the moment. You just have to do it. And there's a lot of benefit that you're going to gain and reap from having done that.
Question, what if one of my team members are sick that day and can't make it to the team meeting at all? Should we just, find a time later in the week, or what should we do?
Do you have
Well,
an
here's the
Jonathan?
answer I was fishing for.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hear, well, so-and-so can't make it, therefore let's cancel the meeting. No, we gotta just keep it same day, same time. There's going to be times where someone can't make it, and that's just, you can't, they know the expectation. If for some reason they can't make it, you're not gonna build your team meeting around that schedule. So it's the whole point of it. You've got to do it consistently every single time. So that was the answer I was looking for.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear
We
you.
hear you, George. I think that's George.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yes. So question is, in that same light where you can when you won't be able to show up for the meeting, especially if you are the leader or CEO, would it be proactive to be able to delegate that meeting to someone in place of you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's maybe a point I didn't emphasize well enough, but yes, a team meeting is an opportune time to delegate responsibility, not only for specific tasks or things that need to get done, but if someone on your team you're trying to groom into being a leader, if it's better for them to hear it from that person, they feel more of that shoulder to shoulder camaraderie. Absolutely. Delegate that responsibility, give your team ownership in the process. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Good point, George.
But here's a caveat to that. If your team is expecting you to be there,
right,
you need to be there. If they're not expecting you to be there, if they're expecting somebody else to lead the meeting, then that's fine that you are not there. But if they are expecting you to be there, or if they can't get stuff done without your permission, then they are going to feel disrespected. They're going to feel like it's a waste of their time. It's again going back to that casualness. And so if you're going to have somebody else lead that meeting, make sure to really delegate that, and that they have authority to make decisions and really do what needs to be done during that meeting. Any other questions before we go up into breakout rooms? You'll be able to ask questions there, but as we're in a group here, any other questions? Okay, it looks like we're all feeling pretty good. So Bryce